Okay, so in the last hours, literally, Eberechi Eze is now chosen Arsenal over Tottenham Hotspur in a deal that kind of blew up last night, and we're in the studio today to, talk about it in complete detail. And I want to go off right from the top by saying that Arsenal obviously have just had the news that Kai Havertz is out. I don't know how long, but I think it's for somewhat of a prolonged period on the touchline. And Arsenal's purchases since Arteta has now been at the club have hit £997 million, which is an average of £165 million per season and a net spend of £718 million. And I think in general with this signing, not just in the way they've done it, but in terms of what the profile of Eze is, what he brings to Arsenal, obviously taking him off Spurs, which was somewhat of a big dog moment from Arsenal, it does feel like this signing could be something that, for Arsenal fans, in their opinion, is to almost, close that gap, and whether or not he's the added X factor that Arsenal really need to, to close the gap and to be that man to take Arsenal there. It's a lot of pressure on him, but he's 27 years old. He's done it for a few years in the Prem. He's probably coming off one of his, best seasons as an individual. Winning the Community Shield and obviously the FA Cup with Palace. And he's an incredible player, and I want to touch on why he's just so good for Arsenal. And to do that, we're going to go through Arsenal's weaknesses that I've noticed when they're shopping in the market for a winger, an attacker, and we're going to go through them individually from 1 to 5, and I'm going to cover why Eze actually fits all of them. Okay, so the first thing we're going to touch on is sort of Arsenal's weakness on the transition. Now, obviously, they've just played their first game of the season, which was a 1-0 win against Manchester United. We covered it on the channel, but I really want to get into somewhat that we saw different from Arsenal in this game, which was that Arsenal actually sat quite deep. And in this block, when they were sat deep, they were looking to find Gabriel Martinelli, Bukayo Saka and Victor Gyökeres on the transition. And what happened, I've actually got a few screenshots to throw up on the screen for you to cover sort of the positions that they got themselves into, which was like a 3v3 on the break against Manchester United, and somewhat why, they were able to take advantage of that, and why I think Eze is probably the perfect player to do that. So on the screen right now, we've got Eze's chance creating carries map, which shows through Opta on the sort of this left pocket play. He has a lot of line breaking passes sort of coming in this sort of wing fielder position, as people like to call it. Now, there's a bit of a general overview with Eze, and I think he can play in multiple different positions, and I think that's probably the main thing about the signing is where can he play. But if we were just talking about him in terms of a left winger, what we've seen is obviously he has the added transition quality that we've seen from Crystal Palace. They played on the break, against all the big oppositions, and I think he facilitated Mateta incredibly well throughout the season. But what I want to touch on is sort of how they use the fullbacks, and we talked about this in the piece we did at the weekend. So if we can imagine that this is sort of Arsenal's shape, so we'll push the wingers on high, we'll put the midfielders, and then actually Zubimendi was dropping in between these centre-halves to allow the fullbacks to push down the outsides. Now, Eze is a player who I wouldn't class as a pure winger. He's not a player who's going to burst down the line, make these long, touchline sprints down the line and whip a ball in. He's a player who's going to come inside. And I think when he comes inside, what we've seen from Arsenal in the game against Manchester United was more of these aggressive runs from the fullback. So we're talking, if he's playing on the wing, can we get a player like Calafiore, Miles Lewis-Skelly to create these sort of inroads next to him and allow Eze to come inside and then get closer to Victor Gyökeres. And I think in general, Victor Gyökeres will be one of the players who gels the most, and it will be the biggest beneficiary of this signing, because Eze's ability to find them slip-through balls between defences is incredible. But I wanted to really touch on how Eze coming inside suits his game way more than being on a touchline, and I don't doubt that Mikel Arteta will use him like this. So we've got his open play touch map from the season just gone for Crystal Palace, and we can see that exact thing, which is sort of hugging this left line here, but then tucking inside and almost running inside with the ball. And you can see the darker patches are on the edge of the opposition's 18-yard box here, just on that pocket. Now, more or less, we're going to move on into the second bit, which is talking somewhat about Eze's quality to game break, and we talk about X Factor a lot on the show and on the channel, and we want to talk about it extremely with Arsenal. So last season, Arsenal were a team who needed that little bit more in front of goal to make it stick. Now, I've got a really good graphic here from one of my friends on Twitter called Tom, We can see that direct offensive contributions, so we're looking at players who have took the most shots and created the most key passes. We've got the list from top to bottom here, and we've got Bukayo Saka, Mohamed Salah, Noni Madueke, Cole Palmer, and Eberechi Eze. So Arsenal now have 3 players inside the top 5 for that stat in terms of creating chances and getting shots off on goal. And that is what we're looking for with Arsenal. We want to be this more, ferocious team. We want to, shoot more, we want to create more, and that's what Eze brings. And now I'm going to move on into the third thing, which is now his positional flexibility and where he can play across the front 5 for Arsenal. So now if we're moving on into the next section, which we're going to talk about Eberechi Eze actually playing more inside the play in terms of, coming inside as a left central midfielder. Obviously, there's a lot going on here for Arsenal because against Manchester United, we obviously saw Martin Odegaard, Declan Rice, Martin Zubimendi. But I think against the lesser oppositions, what we might actually see is maybe a Noni Madueke or Gabriel Martinelli with Eberechi Eze taking up that left centre midfielder position. And what I think this will actually gain is Eze is one of these players who likes to, as we mentioned before, come inside with these sort of inroads. Now, Gabriel Martinelli also, on the ball and off the ball, likes to come inside. Now, I think them players clash way too much, especially if we're talking about them being pinned in the opposition's half. We've got the sequence here against, set defence as we usually see. If Eze's in this pocket, we don't want this player sort of running inside and crowding up Eze's space and getting in his zones where he works his best football. Now, that's where I think Noni Madueke might come in on the left-hand side. Now, it was a bit speculative about the sign on the channel when it first got rumoured, but now we've sort of seen what Madueke might look like in an Arsenal shirt, especially with Eze now. I think it would suit much more a left-footed winger on this side because Eze can play these slip-through balls. He's got a really good off-ball movement. I think his movements between the right centre-half and the right-back, sort of these spin moves, are incredible for a left-footed left winger because he can find these slip-through balls here. And Madueke has experience with that for Chelsea, both playing on the right, playing on the left, finding them slip roads, them underlapping runners. And that can be Noni Madueke, or it can be, as we mentioned before, a Ricardo Calafiore, a Miles Lewis-Skelly, who are, playing more advanced as these fullbacks who are now holding the width to get these players inside. And I just want to show you here, 9 out of his 58 progressive carries in the Premier League last season led to a progressive pass, which is 15.5%. To put that into, basic English, progressive carries are 10-metre plus carries, and the progressive passes are also the same. So we're talking about a player who's making these sort of large carries through the team, through the play, and then he's also playing these large defence splitting passes. 15.5%, progressive pass success rate off the dribble is very, very good. I actually think he's 8th in the Premier League for that stat in terms of the entire division taken into, consideration. And I think that's where, for me, this is where Eze will probably shine the most because his ability in these pockets, I mentioned this when he actually got linked to Arsenal the first time, but he's so physical, he's so good at riding contact and actually using his body, using his lower half to bounce off players. And if he's going to play in the centre or he's going to drift infield, what he'll have to do is ride contact consistently in the block for Arsenal and make things happen. And that is where I think, personally, Eze will work his best football. Partnered with a left-footed outside of him, a left-footed player outside of him. Victor Gyökeres sort of right leaning over here. And then obviously, we mentioned this in the Gyökeres piece, and it was actually a goal that he scored recently in a training session, an open training session against, well, not against anyone, it was a training session. But in the training session for Arsenal, we actually seen Victor Gyökeres score this one goal, and it reminded me so much of our analysis of him, which is sort of him scoring here. Now, if you can imagine, he's split with Eze, who's taking up these left pocket plays, gets Gyökeres leaning a little bit to the right, with Bukayo Saka playing them slip balls down the side. I think it can work. I think it can be a really, really good dynamic for Arsenal. And we've covered him sort of playing left wing, playing central midfield, playing left centre mid. And now we're going to move on into sort of the final sort of wrap-up part of the show. If you're enjoying the video and want more tactical analysis and podcasts, please press the subscribe button below and hit the bell to enable post notifications. Now, lastly, I just want to touch on sort of Eze's, we've touched on like his chance creation and sort of the potential he could have as a pure chance creator for Arsenal. But one thing that my friend Billy Carpenter actually posted on social media was, word for word, this is a bloody brilliant tweet. Arsenal simply need to generate and take more shots this year. Across all competitions, Eze, Madueke, Gyökeres took 356 shots last year. All three of them players had more shots per 90 than any single Arsenal player last season. So we're talking about getting that added X factor, getting them goals, getting the chance creation, and getting that ability to force the issue and actually get into teams. Because I think what we've seen a lot is when Arsenal are crowded around the 6-yard box and crowded around the 18-yard box even, they struggle to actually, have the X factor, the individual quality. And it's a reason why I often champion players like Rafael Leao for Arsenal, players who have got that sort of 1v1 dynamite individual quality. Same way you could probably say about Xavi Simons, maybe Nico Williams as well, Bradley Barcola. But Eze is a different type of player. And I think what Arsenal will actually find with him is that he has got the great game-breaking qualities, but he also has the ability to play left wing in the right conditions, but also play left centre mid against the lesser oppositions and sort of be the player who can play between the lines, bounce off players, play defence splitting passes, and more importantly, the shot maps. So I've got a final graphic for you here which shows Eberechi Eze's shot map in the Premier League last season. And what we've got is a massive cluster of shots being taken in this area. And this is where I think Eze could become sort of world class in one of his standout attributes. His shooting his temperament when shooting isn't the best. He takes a lot of long shots. I think he actually has the highest percentage shot from free kicks taken. So he takes the most shots when he's on the ball on a free kick. So in the Premier League. But I think that area where I've put the red counter is sort of where you will see Eze's best attributes. And I'm just thinking in my head for Arsenal, how do we get in there? I would prefer to see him as a left central midfielder and actually just staying in that pocket with the ability to roam out there. But I think as a left winger, you can also create them conditions if we have someone like a Calafiore who allows him to get inside. I think if he was to play left central midfield, I think a left-footed left winger like Noni Madueke, someone who can partner with down the sides, is probably the best in terms of getting in behind, playing the squared balls, but also getting, if Noni Madueke takes the ball down this line and the defence sinks deeper, you open up a pocket of space here for Eze to take shots, to play them defence splitting passes. And if you just go and watch some of his assists from Arteta this season, his facilitating is incredible. Like, most of Mateta's goals are either made by Eze's defence splitting passes, his off the ball movement, which again, as we mentioned before, this blindside run, if we've got a right centre half and a right back, if he's running at pace, this ability, if the ball is over here with the Bukayo Saka, this run here, he makes so sneakily. And I think he can be a two-way goal threat for Arsenal. And I really do like this signing. I think playing in central midfield, playing in left wing, it's got different solutions for different games. You can play him in different positions in terms of the lesser opposition, the better opposition. If we want to, get him away from the central areas where it might be more crowded, can we get him left wing? Can we get him coming inside with an overlapper? And I think there's plenty of solutions and plenty of ideas with this signing. And I think it's a really, really good one. I will say, as we mentioned at the top of the video, £68 million is the reported fee for Eze. I do think he's a really, really, really talented player. And I do think he's a player that Arsenal need and will, get better because of. But it's a massive, massive load of money. And I think it's somewhere in the region of £240 million that Arsenal have sort of spent this season. And I think it is sort of now or never for Arsenal. If you look at the team, they've got the centre forward, Bukayo Saka's back fit. They've now got Eberechi Eze, they've got Zubimendi to partner Declan Rice, Martin Odegaard, got both centre halves fit. They've got two good fullbacks in each position, world-class goalkeeper. I think now is probably the time to see, the final product of Arsenal, what that looks like. And in general, I think Eze will play a massive part of that if he, when he plays for Arsenal. But I think he provides the transition quality on the run to make the right decision on the run, defence splitting passes. He has the right off-the-ball movement to make their movements in between defenders and somewhat sneak into the box. He actually scores a few headers, which when I was watching his goal catalogue, I weren't expecting, but he sneaks into the box really, really well. I think sort of his tactical flexibility for different games, left wing, left centre midfield. I think he could probably play up front in like somewhat of a false nine because he's so good with contact and he's so good at, running into the box sneakily. So I don't think that's out of the question. I think he could probably play on the right and sort of open up his body a little bit more. Yeah, I think it's a really, really good signing, but most importantly for Arsenal, I think this has to be the missing piece for them. I don't know how much they've got to go again in the market, and I think they're now signing a player who is obviously homegrown, but he's 27, he's coming into his prime. We've got Noni Madueke, who's come off his good season with Chelsea. Victor Gyökeres is the top goal scorer in Europe over the last 2 seasons. I think it's now or never for Arsenal to sort of go in there and win the major trophy. So massive pressure on Arsenal, but I can't say that I've been against sort of their recruitment, and I think they've done very, very smart moves in the market. So, yeah. Please let us know what you think about Eberechi Eze to Arsenal from Crystal Palace, and we'll be back next week for more analysis on the breakdown. Thank you.